From Nigerian money scams and phony IRS communications in your email inbox to Trojan horses and computer malware, we now live in a world of dishonest people who really don't care what price you have to pay for their dishonesty. So, today on Authentic, we're going to take a look at these modern-day digital predators. During the Roaring '20s, times were pretty good, and there was a lot of cash changing hands very quickly. In fact, it was really the first time a lot of people had managed to accumulate a lot of real wealth. So, of course, that got the attention of scammers and conmen all over the planet. And maybe the most notorious of them all was Count Victor Lustig, who actually managed to sell the Eiffel Tower, not once, but twice. And I know it doesn't seem possible, but here's how he did it. He posed as a businessman and showed up in the city of Paris back in 1925, when Western Europe was still recovering from the devastation of the First World War. Lustig made an appearance at a high-flying hotel reception, and after meeting a number of wealthy and influential people, he sent out letters stating that the Eiffel Tower was plagued with engineering mistakes, and the government couldn't afford to repair it, so it would be sold for scrap, demolished. Lustig put it up for bids and the offers started rolling in, and eventually he sold the tower for millions of dollars to a guy by the name of André Poisson. And one of the reasons he got away with this was the same reason that con men almost always get away with it. Poisson was so embarrassed that he'd been deceived that he never told anybody what happened. And so Lustig was free to sell the tower again, a second time, to somebody else just 1 month later. Of course, Mr. Poisson never had to cough up the millions of dollars because, well, the tower was never really for sale. But Lustig pretended to be a bureaucrat who could be bribed, and so he walked away with a $70,000 cash payment. And Poisson obviously wasn't about to tell anybody he'd been trying to bribe government officials. Lustig's most famous con was a wooden money-making box, a contraption about a foot square with brass knobs and handles, and he would insert $100 bills into one end of this box, or sometimes even $1,000 bills. Then he would turn the knobs and dials, and it would look like a perfect copy came out the other end. So, of course, less than honest people were very interested in buying a machine that could do that. So he managed to sell the box over and over and over again, getting as much as $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, sometimes even more. In fact, at one point, he even convinced a local sheriff to buy this box, and of course, the officer was furious when it didn't actually work. But Lustig simply told him he'd been turning the dials in the wrong order, and he even gave back his money to calm him down. Except that what Lustig gave back was all counterfeit bills. According to Victor Lustig, he even managed to swindle the mob boss Al Capone, who supposedly never knew he'd been taken. What Lustig did was borrow $50,000 from the famous gangster and promised that he could double the money in 2 months. After 2 months went by, he went back to Capone's office and explained that the scam he'd been planning had gone, well, horribly wrong, and he failed to double the money. And Al Capone was so impressed with his honesty that out of sympathy for a fellow criminal, he gave him $5,000 on the way out the door. But of course, as usually happens, Mr. Lustig got a little too confident after a long streak of successful cons. He got greedy, and he started spreading counterfeit bills at such an alarming rate that it actually threatened the stability of the US dollar, which means that he ended up on the radar of the Secret Service. And eventually, they arrested him in Pittsburgh and gave him a 20-year stint in Alcatraz, where he finally died in 1949. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Apart from the fact that we all kind of admire a con man for being so clever, I mean, if we're really honest about it, What is it that actually makes these guys successful? Why do con games work? Well, the answer is kind of related to your smartphone. You've probably noticed that once in a while you'll get a message telling you to update your operating system because they've discovered a vulnerability, some kind of weakness that a hacker can exploit to steal your personal data. And the reason con jobs work is kind of related to that. They work because of vulnerabilities that most people have in their character. Weaknesses that dishonest people know how to leverage. And one of those weaknesses we have is painfully obvious. The reason that Victor Lustig was so incredibly successful was because he was willing to exploit our human tendency toward dishonesty. People were willing to shell out big bucks for a money-making box because they planned to use it dishonestly. And of course, people were willing to bribe him to win the contract for scrapping the Eiffel Tower. And because the most effective scams usually appeal to a sense of dishonesty or our appetite for easy gain, a lot of the victims never tell anybody what happened because, well, it would implicate them. Now, if there's one thing we know about scammers, a lot of them love to brag about what they've done because it's usually pretty clever and they want someone to realize how smart they are. Victor Lustig didn't really fall into that category most of the time. He was incredibly careful. He even published a 10 commandments for scamming people. Let me show you some of his commandments. Number 1, be a patient listener, because it's not usually the fast-talking con artist who gets the big money. What you want to do, Lustig said, is let other people do most of the talking because, well, that has a way of making them trust you. His second commandment, never look bored, because of course most people's favorite subject is themselves. And you don't want to give the impression that you're not listening to people. But if you give people the impression that they are the center of the universe, they're going to be less likely to notice what you're trying to do to them. Commandment number 3, let the other person reveal his or her religious views and then suddenly have exactly the same ones. And of course, he did the same thing with political views, and it's easy to see why this works. The word con man is short for confidence man. It's a scammer who tries to make you trust him. And nobody trusts a person who isn't on the same ideological or religious page. So, a con man intentionally mirrors your beliefs. His 8th rule, I'll just skip down to it, we won't read them all. Rule number 8 said, never boast. Just let your importance be quietly obvious. This is a pretty big one, and it makes a lot of sense because nobody likes or trusts a person who is trying to demonstrate how important they are. But if you make people suspect you're important and you're trying to keep it a secret, suddenly it becomes their idea to approach you. And if you can hesitate and make believe that you really don't want to let them in on a good thing that you've got going, they're going to be proud as all get out when they apparently talk you into taking their money. So what Victor Lustig has given us with his rules is some decent insight into how human nature works, how our minds are basically wired. Unfortunately, sometimes this kind of learning comes from people who have very bad intentions because they have to be careful. They have to know what they're doing. I mean, if you're going to walk into Al Capone's office and talk him out of cash, you'd better know human nature, or the price is going to be much higher than just a prison term. In that case, Lustig defied another criminal's expectations by appearing incredibly honest. Now, it's not just the flaws in our character that make us vulnerable. Sometimes these people also exploit our positive traits, such as the desire most of us have to trust. And so there are plenty of innocent victims in addition to those who are just hoping for easy riches. And of course, Lustig lived back in the 1920s, well before the internet, when times were simpler. Now, the game has gotten much more sophisticated, even though the principles are pretty much the same. So don't go away. I'm coming right back to talk about Facebook.
Dragons, beasts, cryptic statues. Bible prophecy can be incredibly vivid and confusing. If you've ever read Daniel or Revelation and come away scratching your head, you're not alone. Our free Focus on Prophecy guides are designed to help you unlock the mysteries of the Bible and deepen your understanding of God's plan for you and our world. Study online or request them by mail and start bringing prophecy into focus today.
If you've been the victim of a scam, you shouldn't feel too bad because most of us fall for something at some point in our lives. And if it's just a few bucks, you tend to, well, let it go. So, for example, I'll admit that I went for the envelope stuffing scam when I was in my early 20s, even though my gut kind of told me it seemed too good to be true. Now, if you're too young to remember the envelope scam, here's how it worked. Someone would put an ad in the classifieds claiming that you could work from home. You would be stuffing envelopes. And back in the day, it seemed like a perfectly reasonable proposition. Direct mail advertising was a really big deal. And so there was no reason somebody couldn't or shouldn't be stuffing envelopes from home. So, because our income was tight, and who wouldn't like a little extra spending money, I sent away for their package. What you got in return was a letter explaining that they had 3 tiers of participation: $5, $10, and $20, and you had to choose which level you wanted up front. Now at that point, I knew this was likely a scam because anytime you have to pay up front, that's usually the case. So I knew something was wrong, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I sent away for the cheapest package, $5, because I figured I could afford to lose those $5, and I really wanted to see what happened. What I got in the mail was a letter explaining that I should take out an ad in the classifieds, and when people responded, I should stuff an envelope with a letter explaining they could ask me for the $5, $10, or $20 package. And I guess what they were doing was technically legal because they actually delivered what they said they would. I mean, they were still lying, but technically it was true. So I guess I'm saying don't be embarrassed if something like this has happened to you, because I pretty much knew it was a scam and I sent them $5 anyway, just in case. But now with the advent of the internet, it's a completely different game. Online predators have more immediate access to people, and they can pretty much pose like anybody they want to. They can steal profile pictures and pretend to be somebody else. They can hack into your friend list and start scamming people looking as if they're you. Or they can just friend you and patiently win your confidence over time. Maybe one of the more despicable forms of internet scams is the one that now preys on lonely people. A single person, maybe a widow or widower, meets somebody online who appears to be their soulmate. After months of going back and forth and even falling in love, suddenly this love of their life says he got a massive medical bill, or that he's about to lose his house, and he timidly asks for money. "I'm so embarrassed to ask," he says, "but I really need your help." People have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to these online predators because they manage to exploit one of the most fundamental needs a human being has: love and companionship. So again, you can learn a lot about how human beings think and operate from the people who prey on us. And honestly, you don't have to be on a platform like Facebook for more than a few days to figure out that online predators are multiplying like crazy and keeping themselves very busy in a world that has billions of potential victims. So now let's think about some of the more common rackets that pop up in your social media feed. One of them, a little while ago, would appear to send a direct message from a friend, and it had a video file attached with the question, "Hey, is this you in this video?" And of course, a lot of people panic, wondering if somebody caught them doing something embarrassing, and so they click on the link out of a desperate need to save their reputation. And if you have been doing something wrong, the scam is all the more effective because guilt and the need to save face, well, those are very powerful motivators. There's also another scam where somebody sends you an email claiming to know what you've been doing on your computer. And they say they're going to post it for the whole world to see unless you pay them a substantial sum of money. I've actually had this one land in my work email inbox. And so I returned the favor. I sent them a note telling them, "Man, I can't wait for you to publish this video you have because, man, I can't wait to be internet famous. So please put it online as soon as possible." Of course, I never heard back because they didn't actually have anything. But afterwards, as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me. The people who do these kinds of things are just playing a numbers game, counting on the fact that enough people do use their computer for embarrassing activity that somebody out there is going to pay the ransom. So again, we have another scam that works by cashing in on vulnerabilities. And if someone happens to be immoral or fails to develop an upstanding character, they're going to be an even bigger target. So it seems to me that while nobody is perfectly immune, a lot of people do fall for these things innocently, people who value things like morality or good character are less likely to become victims. It's not perfect, but it certainly does better your odds. Enough of these scams are built on the idea of easy or dishonest gain that simply being honest in life might be the best protection you could hope for. Now again, I want to be careful. I'm generalizing because we all fall for something at some point. And it's not necessarily an indication that you have some kind of serious moral flaw. But at the same time, the way that a lot of these scams appear to work certainly indicates that it doesn't hurt to be honest. The other day, I found a short article on how to protect yourself from Facebook Messenger scams, which I understand are on the rise because it never takes criminals long to figure out how to use a new platform. This comes from Lauren Kahn, and it was published recently in Reader's Digest. She says, the common thread is the scammer either creates an account impersonating an actual Facebook account or hacks into an existing Facebook account. In either case, the scammer then uses the fake, hacked account to send private messages to the account holder's friends that elicit either money or personal information. The messages vary, but all are designed to prey on our human vulnerabilities, including. And then she goes on to list 5 common vulnerabilities. And again, this gives us amazing insight into what makes human beings tick. Here are the 5 vulnerabilities that she provides. First of all, the desire to be a hero. So in other words, the pleasure you derive from saving somebody else. The desire to appear generous. The desire to win free money. The desire to be loved and admired. The desire to avoid shame or punishment. Now you'll notice some of those are relatively harmless. Some of them are things that most people want. But the one thing they all have in common is the appeal to self. The online predator offers a shortcut to the things that most people crave. And this is one of the biggest vulnerabilities that most of us have. All of us, no matter how noble, still see the world from the perspective of self. And we have this powerful instinct to preserve self above everything else. And it's an instinct that's almost impossible to conquer, and criminals know it. So now we're going to take a little break because it's about that time in the show. But when we come back, I'm going to show you how to make $10,000 a month without ever having to work. And if you believe that, you should probably stay tuned.
Life can throw a lot at us. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. But that's where the Bible comes in. It's our guide to a more fulfilling life. Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we've created the Discover Bible Guides to be your guide to the Bible. They're designed to be simple, easy to use, and provide answers to many of life's toughest questions. And they're absolutely free. So jump online now, or give us a call and start your journey of discovery.
Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we're committed to creating top-quality programming for the whole family, like our audio adventure series, Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy the faith-building stories from this small mountain summer camp and town. With 24 seasonal episodes every year and fresh content every week, there's always a new adventure just on the horizon.
So here's the interesting thing about those online scams and all the con artists out there. Generally speaking, they're taking advantage of vulnerabilities that most of us have, weaknesses in our character. And if you understand that, you're already mostly inoculated against what they're trying to do to you, because knowing is at least half the battle. Now, the same thing is true with the subject of moral temptation. Knowing how the game works and how it takes advantage of your vulnerabilities is at least half the battle. There's an interesting passage in the New Testament written by James, the brother of Jesus, and here's what it says. "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love Him." So there is something to be gained from studying how con games work. He continues, "Let no one say when he is tempted, 'I am tempted by God,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He Himself tempt anyone." You know, that would probably make a great topic for another day, because I find it fascinating how many people want to give God credit for the evil in this world. But for now, let's stay with the topic we're looking at. "But each one is tempted," he says, "when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren." Okay, so right off the bat, James tells us you don't have to be deceived. There are ways to protect yourself against moral temptation. In fact, this is what the Apostle Paul says on the same subject over in the book of 1 Corinthians. He writes, "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man." So, on the one hand, the Bible suggests you don't need to keep beating yourself up for the mistakes you've made in the past, because we're all in the same boat. And I promise you, you are not the only person to do what you did. But then on the other hand, we need to recognize that we don't have to do these things because, well, Paul continues, "God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." So, while God doesn't tempt you, He is on deck to save you, which means that you and I don't have to fall for the things that tend to destroy our lives. And James provides us with a logical progression. He says, we are tempted when we are drawn by our own desires. Then when we coddle those desires and place our wishes at the center of the universe, it leads to sin, which of course eventually leads to death. So it's really the same vulnerability the con men use, the desire to put self first. And we kind of know when we're faced with temptation that what we're doing is wrong. But there's a flaw in our mental process that tries to pretend that nobody's ever going to notice what you're doing, that somehow you'll just get away with it and God won't even notice. There's a famous passage in the Bible that appears more than once, and it goes like this. "The fool has said in his heart, 'There is no God.'" Now, most people assume that's talking about atheists, people who say God does not exist. And some people like to use that verse when they're arguing with the godless heathens they come across on social media. But honestly, that's not what the verse is talking about. It's talking about people who behave as if God doesn't exist, as if He's not going to see what they're doing or call them to account. This is one of the biggest vulnerabilities that we have, morally speaking. The mistaken notion that we're operating in some kind of vacuum where we're never going to have to face consequences. Our capacity for long-range thinking suddenly gets shut down by the overpowering desire to take a shortcut or put self ahead. I can't tell you how many people have come through my office over the years complaining after their marriage has been destroyed that their brains just turned off in a moment of selfish passion and, quote, "one thing led to another and it just kind of happened." Here's what I say to that. No, it didn't just kind of happen. That's a terrible excuse. It doesn't work that way. It didn't happen without your choice. When you choose to feed your moral flaws instead of deal with them, you can't call what you did an accident. I mean, let's be honest, you did it on purpose. Now, fortunately, just like you can get security patches for your laptop or your smartphone, the Apostle James gives us a security patch for moral weaknesses, the ones that always take us down. I'll be right back to show you what those are.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness, or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does my life really matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
Right after James explains how selfish desires, if you feed them, will steer you down a destructive path, he offers this advice. This is the security patch for your character. He says, Therefore, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. What he's saying is that we need to become aware of our weakness. You need to understand how the con game works. Once you understand how and why people fall for temptation, you become far less likely to go for it. Naming your enemy is the right first step. And then once you recognize how feeding self can set you up for a world of hurt, you can start identifying the problem areas in your life and get rid of them. But more than that, it's important to start feeding your mind the right information so that your vulnerabilities start to shrink, which is why James tells us to receive with meekness the implanted word. It's the same thing that David says over in Psalm 17. He writes, You have tested my heart. You have visited me in the night. You have tried me and found nothing. I have purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. Concerning the works of men, by the word of your lips I have kept away from the paths of the destroyer. Look, I know that some of you dismiss this book as a collection of ancient fairy tales. And I also know that a lot of seemingly religious people have used this book to con people out of their hard-earned money, like this is a con game. I mean, just watch religious television on the weekend to see what I'm talking about. But here's what I want you to understand. There are thousands of years of case studies from very sincere and honest people who took this book seriously. And most of them went to their graves not being victims like the rest of us. Life is hard enough the way it is. So if there's some chance that you can mitigate the damage before it happens simply by being aware of how it works, well, that would seem to me like it would be worth your time to take this book and check it out. Thanks for joining me again this week. I'm Shawn Boonstra, and this has been Authentic.